Hello and welcome to the US Election Dialogues. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. The debates are over. The election day is less than 2 weeks away. The second debate was the final opportunity for the candidates to square off against each other. The last chance to change the trajectory of this election, if there's still a chance. The mute button seems to have achieved its purpose. Both candidates for once had a proper debate. The question is, who won? To discuss this and more, let's go straight to our dialogue partners for this evening. Mustafa Tamiz, Democratic strategist with us from Houston. Mark Runtree, Republican strategist with us from Atlanta. Lawrence J. Cobb, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense with us from Washington, D.C. And he'll be joining us shortly, I'm told. And Elizabeth Laris, Professor, University of Mary Washington from Washington, D.C. Good evening and welcome to all of you.
Good evening.
Mark Runtree, let's begin with you. For the first time in this election, we had an actual debate. Who do you think won?
Yes. I think President Trump actually comes out the winner on this. I think he had maybe been viewed as a little bit hot-headed in the original first debate. And I think this is going to serve to actually calm down and sort of stop the political bleeding on his part. I think that a calm debate like this was probably in his interest at this point.
Mustafa Tamiz, do you agree?
No. Look, the market set a very low threshold that President Trump has to get out of debate and not do any major damage. He still did damage, and that's why in Georgia, the polls are tied, and across the country, if you look, Joe Biden leading with anywhere between 9 to 16 points.
Elizabeth Laris, Trump used this opportunity to paint Joe Biden as a typical politician. He accused Biden of not doing anything to accomplish the promises he is making today while he held public office. Do you think Biden's political record will prove to be his baggage?
Biden's political record is, honestly, not politically and not very, very strong. Supposedly he's very, good on foreign policy. So, voters might be a little bit swayed by that. He said that he was going to get China to play by the rules. No U.S. president has been able to do that before, so that would be very interesting. I think that President Trump did bring up these emails, the Hunter Biden emails, which we don't see getting a lot of traction in the U.S. media yet, but that's still under investigation. So I think it's more that kind of baggage that, for 40 years in government, he can't really point. I mean, Biden himself was not pointing to a lot of achievements that he had done, and he does have a certain amount of baggage from, his family associations and also from being, in politics for so many years. The prison reform that he had done, in 1994, that hasn't gone over well with the Black community. So he was trying to get out from under that.
Mustafa Tamiz, I want you to respond to this because Biden spoke a lot also about how the pandemic has impacted families, how they have lost loved ones, how they're struggling to put food on the table. But he did not say very much about he plans to change all of that. How will he beat the virus? How will he revive America's economy? What does he bring to the table?
Well, for one, let's just look at the facts, right? I mean, almost 230,000 Americans have lost their lives. We have almost 8,000 people infected with the virus, and we don't have a national policy. Vice President Biden has put forward a national policy, which is mandating everyone to wear a mask. Scientists will tell you, even more than a vaccine, what prevents death, what prevents the spread of the virus is wearing a mask. So very basic and simple. Two, his plan also calls for, creating the PPPs that healthcare workers need across the United States. I mean, he's basically detailed a plan. He's put it up on his website. National health experts have looked at it and said, this is what we need to do. Versus President Trump can't even acknowledge that the pandemic is spreading across the United States. We're only, 5% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the world's deaths. That's just unacceptable. And there's a lot of people that support President Trump that live in an altered reality. They don't face facts, what the nation is facing. And this debate highlighted the two of them standing next to each other, side by side. And you can compare that one person had a rational, coherent thought, and the other one was just rambling.
Mark Rountree, more than 200,000 Americans have died due to the Wuhan virus, and the president's record has been questioned. His response has been questioned by many. He failed to show any empathy for the victims of this pandemic. Do you think this is going to hurt him in the election?
I don't think it's true that he failed to show any empathy for the victims. I think it is regarded by most Americans as a stupid policy if we were to federally mandate masks. People who live in very unpopulated areas like South Dakota, parts of Oklahoma, there's a lot of the United States that does not live in dense areas. And so a federally mandated mask, I think, is considered rather foolish by most Americans. That's why the president and Congress have left this up to individual states. States that have larger populations have been able to decide for themselves what would be the best policy. Now, as to the overall empathy issue, I don't think it's fair to say that he hasn't shown empathy. I think his opponents have said that. But I think he's repeated over and over that this is a serious problem.
Elizabeth Laris, is Trump on the back foot when it comes to the subject of tax returns? Because Joe Biden has released 22 years of tax returns, and over the years, Trump has repeatedly promised to release his own, but he hasn't really done it.
President Trump should have released tax returns ages ago, because then it would have been a non-issue. So by not, revealing them, that it does become an issue. And, the New York Times came out with data, right? They didn't have the exact returns, but they came out with data, that showed that President Trump paid, $750 or something in taxes. And, he was trying to get out from under that by saying that he really should have been more clear that as a businessman, you pay what's called estimated taxes. You quarterly submit estimated returns to the IRS, where you have to estimate how much money you're making and then how much you pay in taxes. So that's what he has done over the years, and he overpaid because it is an estimate, right? And so business owners, and like me, I do quarterly estimates, and you don't want to underestimate, otherwise there is a huge fine from the IRS. So you overpay. And so that's what he did over the years. He overpaid in these quarterly estimates. So then when you get the tax bill, because he overpaid by millions to be on the safe side, the actual tax bill comes up being small. And I think that he wasn't very good at explaining that. Every businessman in America who does quarterly returns understands that. Every businessman who owns a sole proprietorship, an LLC, you could have one employee. You have to do quarterly returns. So all the businessmen understand that, but he was not good at explaining that to the American public.
Mark Rountree, why doesn't he share these figures with the people? There's probity in public life. If Donald Trump just went ahead and said, okay, this is the tax I paid and this is what I didn't do, there wouldn't be a problem.
I think he should as well. I think he should have done it by now. I think everybody probably on this panel thinks he should have done it by now, and I think most Americans think he should have done it by now. He has a right not to do it, but it doesn't mean that he shouldn't have. I think that it would probably be a good idea for him to be transparent on his taxes, and I think these issues would have gone away. I think that Vice President Biden should have been a lot more transparent about what's on his son's laptop. And they should have been much more forthright in dealing with that. I think both of these candidates have not done a good job of making the American people feel that they're very transparent.
Mustafa Tamiz, the exchange on Hunter Biden was inevitable. That's what Mark Rountree is also referring to. Joe Biden's response to Trump's accusation was a blanket denial, followed by an attack on Trump's own tax returns and business ties to China. Will this be good enough to convince the Americans? Why shouldn't the Bidens come clean on what happened?
Well, first, the United States intelligence agencies across the board have said that this issue of laptop is a Russian misinformation campaign. These people that I'm talking about are Trump-appointed national security officials. That's just a fact, Mark. You can live in alternative reality and put a lot of alternative facts out there, but people can use Google to find out that that's what's happened. So you can keep saying that. Two, the president is in debt of over $400 million to foreign banks. We've just found out that he's got a bank account in China. No American president in the past had these type of failed business dealings, indebted over hundreds of millions of dollars to foreign banks, and currently serving in the White House. Americans don't know if Donald Trump is putting America's interest first or his personal interest first. That's why he's losing in the polls. That's why he's going to lose in November, and he's going to take the Republican Party down with him. All these U.S. senators, Republican senators that have not spoken out about this are likely to lose their races.
Mustafa, Mark Rantry, you want to respond to this?
Well, on a couple of levels. One, there has not even been a review of these or a public release of the emails. It is not true to say that these national security organizations have declared it to be a Russian plant. That is the response of the Biden campaign. In reality, it is Vice President Biden who has not been forthcoming about his ties and his son's ties in the Ukraine and a lot of his foreign dealings. I think a lot of Americans are very concerned about this, and they have not been pressed by the American media to respond to that. I think that is something that'll be coming up in the final week of the campaign. I would actually agree, though, with the gentleman. I don't know that this is going to be, I think it's coming out too late in the campaign for it to have a big change in the trajectory of the campaign. I think these candidates are probably going to win or lose as of today. I think it's probably going to lock in the next maybe 24 hours as to who's going to win and lose this election.
Elizabeth Laris, as we speak, Donald Trump's office has announced a peace deal between Sudan and Israel. Foreign policy is something that Donald Trump wanted to be part of this debate. It wasn't. He was mighty upset about it. How do you rate the Trump administration on foreign policy on a scale of, say, 1 to 10?
Ooh, it depends on what country you're looking at. Okay, so give him an 8. Give him an 8. Okay, to bring peace deals to the Middle East is something that every U.S. president has been trying for decades, and we haven't had a substantial breakthrough since the Camp David Accords in '79, and then you'd say after the Gulf War, the U.S. twisted Jordan's, arm, because they were on the wrong side during the Iraq War, right? Twisted Jordan to normalize relations, with Israel. But the last time I checked, that was, like 30 years ago or something like that, right? And so it is remarkable that how many countries and entities in the Middle East are now willing to come to the table and sit down and recognize that Israel exists. Again, no other president has been able to do this to this extent. And, regarding China, he is the only president who is really holding China's feet toward the fire, whether you like it or not, right? I know Vice President Biden has been very critical of the trade war. But, I run around in a lot of academic circles, and a lot of my friends are Republicans, they're Democrats. But even the Democrat academics are looking at previous administrations and saying, where were you when China was building these islands in South China Sea and threatening other countries in the region? You were clearly not, looking at China. And, for someone who was the chief of the U.S., Senate Foreign Relations Committee, you don't see a lot of foreign policy achievements under Biden's belt. And so I do find it rather ironic that you've got this businessman from Queens coming along and actually having some significant foreign policy achievements and tightening up our relations with Taiwan. No president has done as much toward Taiwan either. He has criticized our allies. That is true. I would like to see if he wins, or if Biden wins, to have more support of our allies, particularly in Europe. But then again, Trump was successful in holding NATO countries' feet to the fire and increasing their contributions to NATO, because that was just too much on the U.S.'s back. And the others really did need to pony up. Did he do it, in a ham-handed way? Yes. Did he get results? Yes.
Well, that's quite an answer. Mustafa Tamiz, there is wise agreement that China is the next foreign policy challenge for the world, including whoever becomes the next president of the US. But we haven't heard Joe Biden question Beijing really over its own cover-up during the initial days of the pandemic. What gives the Democrats the confidence that he will be the man to deal with China?
Well, look, let's look at the facts. The trade deficit with China under President Trump's leadership has gone up, not down. He's had these trade wars, which costed the United States farmers significantly, and then the U.S. taxpayers had to create subsidy to bail out U.S. farmers for bad policies, bad trade deals that President Trump was engaged in. When it comes to North Korea has launched ballistic missiles now that can reach continental United States. And President Trump sends love letters to Kim Jong-un. At every level of the United States foreign policy, President Trump has failed. He's failed to build coalitions with our allies. He has failed in lowering the standards of the United States and holding up other democracies. He pals around with dictators. This is not American values. The United States was known as not just a democratic country, but a country that set the standard for democracy. And Donald Trump has squandered that, squandered the soft power of the United States. He's allowed China to step into Latin America and put their hooks in Latin America now. I can go on and on and on. If you look at objective facts, Donald Trump's presidency has been abject failure for the United States.
Well,
couldn't disagree more.
I think it was.
This is the first administration.
But Mark Rantry, on the question of foreign policy, Joe Biden has accused Trump, and not just Joe Biden, a lot of people have accused him of cozying up to thugs, countries like North Korea, China, and Russia, and poking fingers, quote unquote, at American allies. We saw an example of that today when Trump referred to India as filthy. How can allies like India then trust a president like Trump?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, President Trump has brought tough love to organizations like NATO that in great degree had gotten sort of fat and lazy. There are a lot of organizations that the United States participates in militarily that simply have become reliant on the United States to fix problems. And a lot of the allies of the United States, frankly, have also become the same way. Over the years, there are a number of countries that we could sit and name. But I tell you, one of the great things about this administration is that it's the first administration in many decades that has pretty much brought a lot of world peace to the table. The United States is not at war with anyone, and that has been a long time since that has happened. One of the things that I think, finally, that I think is very relevant to the folks that may be watching this broadcast, when I grew up in the 1970s and 80s, and there was not as much attention to Southern Asia as there is now. And a lot of that is because of the problems that have happened with the Chinese, but between the United States and China. But I think one thing that the president has done really well is to acknowledge the importance of India. And that I think it's very fair to say that the friendship, at least speaking just as an American, from America to India has become much closer in the last, during this administration. And I think a lot of people are recognizing that that has been overlooked over the years.
Well, that's because today's India is very different from the India of the 1970s and 80s. But yes, presidents and leaders deal with each other as not as individuals, but as heads of the countries they represent. I'm not sure how much of a role does personal equation and chemistry work there. But Elizabeth Larris, before we end this, I quickly want to understand what you think of today's debate, whether he wins or loses. This will be Trump's last presidential debate. According to an early poll, viewers and undecided voters in North Korea say that Joe Biden won the debate. North Carolina, I'm sorry. Do you think this debate was a missed opportunity for Trump?
No, I think Trump, we all can see that Trump was much better behaved in the second debate than in the first. And so if there's anyone out there who is still on the fence, and I think that's very few people because, something like 40 million have already gone to the polls, and people are pretty firm in which candidate they like. So if they were on the fence, they could at least see that Trump could hold a debate and that he was not as acerbic. And so they could say, okay, maybe this is a guy we can live with for 4 more years. Joe Biden was very much, the way he was in the first debate. So I don't know if he moved the ball for him any. So the people who are predisposed to support him, I think, looked at him and said he did a fine job. And he did. People are looking at Trump who were a little bit skittish. I think were able, if they were leaning toward him at all, to feel comfortable finally pulling the lever for him.
Mustafa Tamiz, more than 50 million Americans have already voted in this election. Does this debate even matter?
Well, 75% of the people would have voted by election day. Elections are not just a day, it's almost a season during the early vote. So, look, I believe the die is cast. I think Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. You know, a lot of people are afraid to say something like that because they have the PTSD from last election in 2016. But he has had the most durable lead in polls from anywhere from 6 to 9% since he's filed for office. That's the longest durable lead than Bill Clinton against Bob Dole in 1996. So I think that's it. But I just want to point out, when your own supporters say you did well in the debates because you behaved or you stopped the bleeding, it tells you that the campaign is in trouble. And Donald Trump's campaign is in real trouble. Not for what their television advertising looked like, not the fact that they just haven't raised as much money as Joe Biden, but that he has failed this country and this nation. He has made this about himself rather than making it about the American family. And that's his abject failure. And he will go down in history as the worst president the United States has ever had.
Mark Runtry, I think that was for you. Donald Trump is not liked by the press, let's face it. And now, after 4 years in office, he can't even say that he was the outsider. He is the outsider who's going to change Washington. Does he still have a card up his sleeve?
Well, my company is the largest polling operation in my state of Georgia, and Trump is actually leading in Georgia now. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of these overnight polls are usually clickbait, we call them, type polls, where people just rush to vote on a website that they're familiar with. I think we're going to see in the next few days how this poll plays out. I don't think there's any question that Trump's policies, generally speaking, are very popular. I think the question is, his personality rubs a lot of people the wrong way, and it's going to be a question as to whether they can think in terms of accepting that personality, kind of aggressive personality, in exchange for some of the good policies brought to the table.
We'll have to wait and see then. Thanks very much. I'm out of time. Mark Runtry, Mustafa Tamiz, Elizabeth Laris, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us. We'll wrap with this. Cheers.